Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Forensic Psychology. We are here with these beautiful purpley glittery screens behind us because we are celebrating International Women's Day, which is on Tuesday the 8th of March this year. And we want to do this episode to talk about simply that and to celebrate all women. So I'll hand over to you, Jerry. You've got some statistics to share with us.
Yeah, so we've got just a few things about thinking about the employment of women, because one of the big things I think we often talk about is the gender gap between pay, and whereas we know it really is improving, there is still quite a gap at the moment. So in April 2021, it's still about 7.9%, although it's on a downward trend. So there is still a gap between a male and a female doing the same job. And it's more pronounced for older people. So people sort of over 40 there's usually a more pronounced gap. And again, as senior managers, males seem to get paid more than females in the same job. But also it's higher in England. The gap's bigger in England rather than Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland seem to be managing it better than us somehow. So we don't know why.
It'd be really interesting to also know about the forensic psychology data on that, wouldn't it? Because we sort of stereotypically, I think people assume that forensic psychology is kind of dominated by women, but maybe there is more of a pattern in that the males forensic psychologists reach the higher positions quicker, or
maybe
it'd be interesting to know that in kind of information.
So there's sort of some things that don't get spoken about a lot. So things like premenstrual tension and menopausal symptoms, which can have quite a major impact on women's health. And I think women still find it quite difficult to talk about those sort of things, and having time off, if you have to have time off for those sort of things, can impact in the longer term on your career. And I was speaking to a person who'd come back from maternity leave, and she'd had to have a room to breastfeed in. And when she told me which room they'd been given, I mean, in a prison there's never really spare rooms, but the room she'd been given, it was just a disgrace. She wouldn't want to go and sit in there, let alone go there and express milk. I mean, it's just awful. But they have to legally be given a room, so it seemed like it was the only the sort of worst possible room she could be given. I was really shocked to think that would happen, really, because it's not a pleasant thing to do at the best of times, but to do it in an unpleasant sort of situation as well isn't great.
I did some research, which hopefully will be published soon, but it was about the experience of females in the workplace, and two of the main themes that came out was the menopause and also the experience of being a mother and a woman.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it wasn't, in fact, participants didn't really share anything sort of practical, like the breastfeeding room scenario that you speak of. It was more about how they were viewed, and that this idea that if they were menopausal or if they were mothers, they were therefore ineffective in their roles because of those things, rather than those things sort of like became who they were rather than them being just their jobs.
It should be just accepted as part of life.
Yeah, it feels that now there's much more an acceptance that we can talk about these things that were otherwise perhaps silenced, but I think there's still a bit of a long way to go in terms of how we then handle it, or talk about those things.
When I was started a job when I was very young, doing a Saturday job, this man came into work and told me he'd got premenstrual tension. I said, "Oh, have you?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, I've never heard of a man having that before." And he said, "Oh, I don't know what it is, but I hear people have taken time off for it." So I just told my boss I'd got it. But I think that just shows the fact that, and I know for a fact he'd got a sister, and a mother. And so, it's interesting that they'd obviously never talked about it, but he thought he'd try and get more than enough work with it, but it didn't work.
Do you feel proud to be a woman in the workplace?
I mean, I often think about people who start their careers from university and then start straight into work, and they don't have the time, and then at some stage will be possibly taking time off to have children. That must be a hard decision to make. I didn't go into starting work full time until after I'd had children, so it was sort of slightly different, but it must be a hard decision to make as to when do you take, I mean, I know a lot of trainees who say, I wait till I qualified and then I do it. And then you're thinking, I spent all this time qualified and now I'm going to have to take time out, so it's a big decision to make, isn't it? Whereas a man doesn't have to make that decision. Although now there is more, I do know people that have taken paternity leave if the woman is better paid and the woman goes back to work or chooses that she prefers to go back to work. They go back to work instead. So there is more that is more socially acceptable or sort of recognised now, I think.
Yeah, it's about having choice, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
another couple of the participants, they were talking about things whereby they felt that it was always them who had to take care of the children, if it meant having a day off or needing to pick them up. And that's great if you have the choice to do that, like if you've made that conscious decision, but it shouldn't be an expectation that because I'm a woman therefore that's what I will do. I
think that is often the case for lots of women I've spoken to, and myself as well. People have said that would be the expectation. If a child was ill, it'd be you to go and get them. I suppose it takes a long time to change those sort of social values, really. And also the sort of roles, because when I was at school, I said we were looking at careers options, and I said I wanted to be an engineer, even though I didn't know what it was. And then they said, well, women can't be career engineers. And I thought, oh, well, now I really want to be one, because I've been told I can't be one. But it's interesting that there are more women, going into those sort of traditional roles. So going into architect, being an architect or being an engineer and doing those sort of roles. But it's slowly moving, I think, because often women are just seen as carers and nurturers, and men are seen more as producers, that they'd go out and farm the land or grow things and do that sort of thing, which I guess goes back to hunter-gatherers, really.
I'm smiling at the thought of the last recording we did with Lawrence Jones, where he talked about maybe having pursued a career in Jazz FM. And I think how different would the world have looked if you had become an engineer? If you and Lawrence were in Jazz FM and an engineer, the place would be very different.
Yeah, I might have built the aerial or the building or something.
I think one of the things that I have struggled with being young and a woman is that I feel like sometimes there's some stereotypes put on me that perhaps wouldn't be with a male counterpart, whereby if I've had experiences before where I am talking to a prisoner, or there was one incident where a prisoner gave me a Christmas card, gave the same Christmas card to my male counterpart, and I was questioned as to the appropriateness of this prisoner giving me a Christmas card and the other man wasn't. And I think that there is some sort of like stereotypical views that are around, which I do think are getting better.
Often the prisoners have said to me about the amount of young female psychologists there are, and that is I think it's not necessarily, I don't know if they would say the same if they were young men, because I haven't ever worked with any young men psychologists, but that it's sort of almost sense of, well, how can they how would they know what it feels like for us? That's the difference, I think. Which I can see a bit. I guess sometimes if we were going, for instance, to a doctor, we might choose to go to a female or a male doctor, depends on what we're going for. So, and you can see it, but there's lots of other men say, oh, actually I prefer talking to women, I find it easier to talk to women. So I guess like anything, it's individual taste, really. But it is always interesting how there is so many females in psychology and so many males tend to go into criminology, and we're not really sure why that is. So I'd be interested if people had an answer to that, as to why that happens.
Yeah, get in touch if you've got any ideas. Let's have a theory going.
But it does seem like it's seen as a sort of caring profession, and therefore a female profession rather than a male profession. And like you say, the men tend to be more in the managerial roles. So was there anything else you found from your research? I know you will hopefully get it published, but what did the female, because that was on females, based on females, wasn't it? Which again in itself is unusual to do research based on females.
Yes, there was another theme that centered around this idea of the desirable leader, and females felt that what was desired in being a leader was these masculine traits, such as being bold, being sometimes aggressive, being able to sort of handle the room in a quite fearful type way, and they felt that the organization sort of had this culture whereby if you were male, you were much more successful as a leader than if you were female, because these caring, nurturing traits that females possess, they felt that they weren't deemed suitable or appropriate, which was really sad, really, actually. really good, these females have really great examples of their managerial capabilities, and sometimes they felt that they weren't appreciated.
Yeah, and I guess it is a difficult job in terms of being seen as a sort of tough person. I was listening to a podcast the other day about a governor who was retiring, a male governor, and he was saying that whenever you're in the country, you're on call 24/7. So, if it's a weekend, a night, it doesn't matter, you're always on call. And I guess that might be more, I don't know if it is more difficult for female if they are having care of children to be on call to go into a prison in the middle of the night or late at night. So again, those sorts of things can make a difference, and that might stop a female going forward in a career, knowing that that one might be what's the expectation of you.
I was thinking about what it would feel like to be a male in a team of forensic psychologists that are all female. So despite the fact that I've had, for example, if I use myself, I've had experiences whereby I felt that I've been discriminated against because of my gender. And if I'm in a group full of females and a male is in that group, does he feel ostracized and isolated alongside me feeling like in the bigger picture I'm ostracized and isolated? It's just something I've thought about.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know if that is the case for males as well, feeling if they feel outsiders.
Yeah,
I'd be really interested to know what their experience is.
Okay, so Jerry, as we close this episode, one of the things that the International Women's Day are asking women to do is to celebrate their achievements. So I'm asking you to tell me about your achievement in the past week.
Well, I've achieved something that's taken 2 years in gestation, but had a book come out this last week, which is about interventions within therapeutic communities. So I'm really proud about that. It's taken a long time, but I'm pleased it's come out.
Ah, congratulations! It's going to be on my Amazon list in the next 24 hours.
We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can get 20% off as well.
Brilliant. My achievement this week is I submitted my final piece of work for my traineeship today. So I am feeling quite proud of myself.
No, that's a great achievement.
Very tired, but very proud.
And then I guess the trouble is now you have a waiting period to hear until you hear back from what the outcome is.
Yeah, it takes 3 months. So I think for the next 2 months, I'll sort of just pretend it's not happening. And then the final month, I'll just be a bag of nerves.
Yeah.
But we are encouraging our wonderful Let's Talk Forensic Psychology listeners to do the same and to tell us what you have achieved, and because we want to celebrate you. So if you use the hashtag Let's Talk Forensic Psychology and the hashtag, up here, look at that there, hashtag BreaktheBias, and tell us what you have achieved, and we'll celebrate with you. So that does mark the end of the episode. We just wanted to come on here and celebrate International Women's Day. So Tuesday the 8th of March, use the hashtag and let's celebrate International Women's Day. So all that's left for us to say is let's talk forensic psychology.